generally here in Oklahoma, most people are going to consider either spring or fall calving. You hear and see some things relative to summer calving, particularly from some of the research that they've done in Nebraska. We have had a few producers try it here, and by summer calving, I'm talking, June and up through the middle of July, probably mid-May to mid-July. We have not studied it ourselves, but just from what we've seen with producers who have tried it, we don't recommend it. And simply it gets down to fertility and the heat of the summer that we have in Oklahoma. And fertility and heat do not go well together in the females, and it doesn't really go very well with sperm quality in the summertime as well. So I'll show you an example of that here in a few minutes. So, there might be some argument about the timing of spring calving or the timing of fall calving, and we'll get into some of that. But generally speaking, we're talking about February to April, and then September and October calving in our fall calving systems. So kind of the comparing and contrasting, which one of these would you think most people would use? Spring, sure. And it's difficult to tell about how much of each we have, but near as I can tell, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of somewhere between 60-40 and maybe 65-35, something like that. Don't have any real good solid data. And then we have a few folks still that have, let's see, I heard maybe it was Brian said one time, we have 12 30-day calving seasons. Anybody got one of those systems? Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit about the value of actually having a calving season, right? And not just sort of rolling the dice and letting the bull do what he wants year round. So this is one piece of information that's a nice data set that demonstrated, that there is value. In fact, in this study, for every 1 day decrease in the breeding season, length of the breeding season, there was an improvement in terms of their cost of production. So their cost of production went down. And I'll talk about some of the reasons why that might occur as we go along here. But in general, compared to year-round calving, in this large data set, it was worth almost just under $14 per hundredweight of calf weaned. Okay, does that make sense? So $14 per hundredweight of calf weaned, lower cost of production. Well, how can that be? Well, I mean, if you think about, let's say winter feeding, just a quick example, and you've got cows in there that are in early gestation, some that are in late gestation, some cows that are in early lactation, some cows may be in late lactation, and you're doing what? Feeding maybe 3 or 4 pounds of cubes and some hay. Well, guess what? Somebody's getting underfed, somebody's getting overfed, somebody might be getting about the right amount, and so on. So you see what I'm getting at. You just cannot really fine-tune much of anything to cut back on your cost of production. And you could say the same for your grazing management system, stocking rate, so on and so forth. There's quite a bit. This is an older study that some of the educators put together from our livestock market several years ago. But it showed that in general, if you could put together 10 uniform calves, the price of those calves went up $7 per hundredweight. So there's value in having a larger number of more uniform calves. And I'm sure the guys are going to, probably JJ's going to talk about that tonight when he talks, or maybe Kelly, Dr. Raper, when she talks about value-enhanced marketing. But that's a simple thing. But if you can put together uniform sets of calves and larger groups of those calves, the price generally goes up compared to selling 1 or 2, and having a wide range in calf weight or size and age. These are just principles related to calving and breeding season I want to mention before we get into some of the other details. But generally speaking, if you look at the Kansas Farm Management Association data, as they're really nice publication on their website. It's Kansas Farm Management Association. Kevin Pendle and other faculty members up there have got a really nice series of studies where they show that about 60 to 66% of the cost of production in cow-calf beef cattle production systems is due profitability. Differences in profitability is due to cost of production. Only about a third of differences in profitability is due to more output. What do I mean by output? Well, bigger calves, right? More calves born, bigger calves born, heavier cows at culling time so that you get more cull-cow income and so on. But it's fascinating to me. You know, we think about, and it's easy to see, it's easy to measure weaning weights, for example. And so we're really focused on weaning weights. But 2/3 of the difference in profitability gets back to your cost. So it's more important to focus on cost. And so we're talking about a little bit later about efficient cows and your calving season, the resources you have available, your cost of production is the really big factor in terms of being successful in the cow-calf segment of the beef cattle industry. So example, push and spring calving dates back into January. Can you increase your calf weaning weight doing that? Sure you can. They're going to be older, right? If they weigh 150, 200 pounds and they hit green grass this time of year, they're going to gain faster than brand new babies, right? But guess what? It's going to probably drastically increase your feed cost through, if you're calving in early January. I had a guy tell me the other day, I just synchronized my heifer and I looked down. Well, I guess I didn't look at my watch. I don't have a watch. I looked at my iPhone. And you can tell I wasn't born yesterday. But it was April 6th. Well, guess when that means he's going to be calving those heifers? I'm like, for crying out loud, he's going to have a big feed bill, right? Or he better have, because if he doesn't, and those first calf heifers are nursing a baby calf in January and February, if he doesn't, what's going to happen? They're going to be thin come breeding season, and they're not going to breed back very well, right? So he's almost forced himself into a huge feed bill because of that decision to calve that early in the spring. And in fact, a lot of the seed stock operations do that. Now they have different motivation, different reasoning for that because, you know, they're marketing. And bigger calves sell better. They want them to be so big for their sale and so on and so forth. So there's perhaps different justification for that depending on your primary goal. But ignoring some of the following principles can have devastating impacts on production. Certainly body condition score at calving, for example, is a really good example of that. And, you know, time of year calving. So if you're calving in the spring, and let's just say you start your heifers calving about the middle of February, so you know the challenge for your system is going to be getting them in good body condition and maintaining that good body condition through the dead of winter, right? That's the challenge with spring calving, and especially with first calf heifers. Okay, now we flip that around and we're talking about a fall calving system. What's the big challenge there? Can you get a first calf heifer in good condition by September, October? Yeah, it's like falling off a log, right? If they can't get through the summer, good quality forage and so on, and not get in pretty good body condition out there grazing abundant forage, high quality forage, then you got a problem, right? You may have the wrong kind of cattle. But generally speaking, that should not be an issue. The issue is what? After they calve, keeping them in decent body condition. And so if you're going into the season with let's say you breed around Thanksgiving, And you don't want them to go from a body condition score 6 to a body condition score 4 by the time you breed them, right? And so that's your challenge. It's not getting them in good condition, it's maintaining reasonable condition until they do calve. Heat stress and adaptability, we'll cover that here in just a few minutes. And then this one, I think this is one that we've overlooked a lot in our industry. And that is that production is limited by the environment. Now, part of the environment is heat stress or cold stress, but mostly we're going to be talking about the nutritional availability. So, you know, if you're going to wean at 210 days of age, you wouldn't expect your fall calving system to produce much, right? Those calves coming out of the winter, unless you creep feed, they're not going to weigh at 210 days of age, so let's say March, as much as your springborn calves. They shouldn't anyway. So are they limited by their genetics, the fall calving? Nope, they're limited by the environment, right? If you're just feeding hay or they're grazing stockpiled forage, it's lower quality nutrition. The cow's not giving as much milk, and so that calf is not, and the calf doesn't have as high quality forage to graze. So anyway, that's an issue too that you might want to consider. Now, you know, obviously the way to make up for that in a fall calving system is what? Wean later, right? That's why a lot of people, especially the bigger ranches up in, say, Osage County, Washington County, up in there, they'll wean their calves the middle of July, fall-born calves, and steers may weigh 700 by then, because you've kind of restricted them through the winter, and now you kicked them out on green grass with a mother that's giving a lot of milk, because now in April and May, she's getting a lot of high quality nutrition. She's producing a lot of milk now. Calf is compensating, right? A compensatory gain, you've heard of that term. Well, that's what that calf is experiencing now, and so is his mother. She'll bounce back and gain weight, giving a lot of milk, and that calf will gain 3 to 3.5 pounds a day. So there's ways to offset that, but that's just part of that system. Fine calving season, so you get the uniform calf crop benefit, concentrated labor. So, you know, calving those first calf heifers, pretty obvious. If you can gather them up and calve them in 45 or 60 days, you're liable to pay a lot more attention because it gets old, right? And after 90 days or so, you're like, oh, for crying out loud, they're on their own. Anybody that's left, right? So nutritional management, we've already talked about that. You don't want a tremendous amount of variation in your cows in order to do a good job fine-tuning your nutritional system. Animal handling, same thing. You know, I heard mentioned earlier, you know, given those pre-breeding vaccination shots 45 days ahead of the start of the breeding season. Well, if you're strung out calving over 100 days, I mean, you got some cows that haven't even calved yet at that point. So you got to run them back later and bring them in and vaccinate. So that's another thing to consider. And then here's another one. This is a good one. Facilitates use of technology. So, you know, a simple example is if you've thought about implementing artificial insemination. Well, you're not going to put a seeder, a sustained, what is it? What does the seeder stand for, Brian? Anyway, use synchronization technology in a cow that calved 3 days ago. There's no point, right? Okay, so really here's what we're talking about relative to the environment, the pluses and negatives relative to spring versus fall calving. This is just a graph that shows the circle here represents forage quality. So this would be, say, maybe late April, May, and June. We've got really nice quality forage, right? And then the quality starts to go down. And the darker it gets, the lower quality forage, okay? So we're calving up here in these 2 months, but a lot of people would maybe calve in March and some maybe the very last of February. And so this cow is going to be our breeding season is going to be during relatively high quality forage, and through the latter part of the summer, forage quality might be declining. Then this circle on the outside represents their nutrient requirements. Okay, so this is just kind of another way to demonstrate what we just talked about, and that is their nutrient requirements are highest when? After they calve, right after they calve, right? So, you know, peak lactation occurs about 60 days, give or take, after they calve, and that is the point in time when their nutrient requirements are absolute highest throughout the production cycle. Okay, and that's going to be right in here. So lowest point in the nutrient requirements would be when? When you wean the calf. And you truncate or you stop milk production. Okay, so now she's got a moderate sized fetus, you hope. It's not real big yet, so it's not requiring a lot of nutrients, but her nutrient requirement should be pretty low here for about 3 months until that fetus really starts growing rapidly in the last trimester. Okay, right up through here, her nutrient requirements start to go up. So there you can see that going into calving, you're kind of fighting this offsetting trend here, right? And so the trick is to find a system, come up with a system to minimize your cost here to offset low quality forage when you're approaching a time period when their nutrient requirements are pretty high. And shifting this 2 notches over here, just doesn't, to me, I don't see how people in a commercial cow-calf production. Now, unless you have you might have a cool season annual forage grazing system or something that's relatively low cost and be able to create high quality forage back here and therefore make that work in your system. Not too many people would have that opportunity, at least in a cow-calf operation. Fall calving, this is the same forage quality circle you saw earlier. I've just put the calving down here in October, September and October primarily, and then we'd be trying to breed those cows here around Thanksgiving when forage quality has headed south and gone south. And so therefore we're going to try to manage our forage, provide a supplement and so on we probably won't be able to eliminate the weight loss and the body condition score loss during this time period, but we can try to minimize it, okay? And so that's what our nutritional program is going to be designed to do during that period. She's going to calve in good body condition. We just want to hang on to some of that stored fat until she's had time to become pregnant. And then after pregnancy, she's probably going to lose, if we don't, well, let me mention that it seems like a lot of people are concerned about a fall calving system because they think they have to keep those cows in that body condition score 6 that she calved in throughout the entire winter. Well, if you do that, your feed costs are going to be really high because now you're talking about feeding her to keep her from losing any weight all winter long, and that is expensive. Okay, and so that's why most people spring calve, but once she becomes pregnant, there's not much risk of losing the pregnancy. Now we can argue about fetal programming and those kind of things you hear and read about. The jury's still kind of out on all that, but if you sort of reduce or minimize feed inputs after the breeding season of fall calving cow herd, generally speaking, those cows can get down to a body condition score 4, give or take, without hurting their production and still be successful in terms of calving early next fall. Okay, so body condition score of which one of those cows would you consider to be thin? Dumb question, I know. So this is the spring, right? This is actually a fall calving cow that's been fed a little bit of protein supplement all winter. And she's pretty thin. This cow we'd give, if you peeled off most of the hair there, we'd give her about a 2.5. So she's pretty thin. This is 7 over there, right? And That's probably a herd mate. I can't tell you that for sure. These are our cows at the Range Cow Research Center. But anyway, this would be a herd mate there in, that'd probably be about the middle of July. And this is very typical. We see that kind of range in our fall calving system. You don't get that range in the spring calving system in terms of change in body condition. Okay, so this is important because there's a close relationship between the body condition score at calving in the first 90 days after to reproductive success and to the calf immune system. Okay, so cows that calve in thin condition have less colostrum, and the colostrum has lower concentration of immunoglobulins, so on and so forth. So passive immunity in those calves is not as successful, and that actually impacts their lifetime ability to fight off a disease challenge. So it's important that those cows calve in good body condition on average. Current body condition, if you want to think of it this way, it's a reflection of what has happened, right? It's a point in time where if you were to look backwards, you could add up all the things that resulted in the body condition score she's in today. Recent nutrient supply and recent nutrient requirements. So think of those two circles that we looked at earlier, and either the match that you might create there with your system or the mismatch. Management grazing, supplementation program, herd health program, and so on. And then here's another one, and we'll talk about this in our last section here in just a few minutes, but that is match or mismatch of cows' genetic potential to the forage and management system. This is a study that I did when I was still at the University of Missouri, but I like to tell people this is where I found out who my friends were. And by the end of this project, I didn't have any friends left. But here's why. We took a first set of first calf heifers, and we didn't have any fat first calf heifers. 5.5 was as high as it got, okay? And then we made some of them actually thinner. So all the way down to 3 first calf heifer. Now I'll just tell you, that's a disaster. Don't do that, okay? And let me show you why. Then after they calved, we fed these different levels of nutrition, anywhere from the point to where they lost another condition score by the end of the breeding season, or they gained 2 full condition scores. So all the way from a very restricted low energy diet, all the way up to this would have been almost a feedlot diet, as much as they could eat, okay? And what we did was we bled, took a blood sample from these heifers every week until they'd all started cycling again. Well, this is why I didn't have any friends left, because all my grad student friends were helping me bleed heifers 160 days later. Actually, it was more like it was almost 200 days later. I just didn't put that on here, okay? So it can be a real disaster. But the point here is that if you can calve them in good condition and they don't change, this 89 days, took them 89 days to cycle that first time. Okay, that's not great. You expect first calf heifers to be about 21 days longer coming back into heat compared to mature cows. That's just kind of the average. So cow might be able to do that in around 70 days, right at 70 days. But if you calved her in a thin and she didn't change, look at the mess we created there. So not a good idea. And the other thing that I want to show you is that you cannot make up for this mistake by feeding the heck out of them. Okay? So if she was thin, well, let's start with the 4s here. She's 131 days here, and if we fed the heck out of them, we got them clear down to 111, okay, compared to 89. So the condition they are in the day they calve is the most important thing. You can modify their success from a reproductive standpoint a little bit by their post-calving nutrition. But the big point is, in time, is their body condition. And we have, this is just one experiment of several that points out really the same principle. Quick thing about heat stress, this is a real nice literature review, and I've got it summarized for you here in one page. And this is where I said female or bull fertility and heat don't go well together. So high temperatures and humidity had the most effect. Pregnancy calving rates from 10 to 25% lower, common in cows bred in July through September, and this was literature they reviewed from all across the country. High temperatures reduced conception rate, lengthened the postpartum interval, and reduced duration of estrus. So if they did come in heat, it was a shorter heat period. Okay, this is a study that was done with bulls relative to heat stress. Okay, and what you've got here is percent motile sperm, and these bulls were semen tested numerous times here throughout this experiment. And you've got a control group of cattle or bulls that were not heat stressed the whole time, and a group of cattle that were put through pretty serious. This was actually done in a set of chambers where they could control humidity and heat. And they put them through this heat stress up until this point in time. You can see what happened to their percent motile sperm, right? But what I want you to see is how long it took them to recover. So 8 weeks. It took them 8 weeks to get back up to the same sperm quality as the bull after they removed the heat stress, to get back up to where the bulls, bulls were that had no heat stress to begin with. And that's why we say that's one of the reasons why the summer calving we don't think will work well in this part of the country. Just a few things relative to timing of spring calving, February, March versus later. The heat issue is going to be the main thing here. Milder calving would be an obvious advantage in a little bit later spring system. July and August breeding is going to be the big one. Calves may grow slower because forage quality is lower later in the summertime for those little calves. So down market, everybody else is weaning in October too, right? And if you wean and sell your calves, I'm sure JJ will cover this tonight, that's the time of year when cull cow prices are the lowest and weaned calf prices are the lowest. So that might be a little bit of an advantage there. It's also an advantage for the fall calving system. Cows winter and better body condition score. Cows might be thinner in the winter because they're lactating later in lower quality forage. Okay, this is just some data from our operation. These calves are weaned June 20th, July 15th, calving in September and October. Native range land, and these cows were stocked at a low stocking rate. So we were stocked to be prepared for a drought so that we did not have to market animals. And that would be, I'd say that would be a very conservative stocking rate for our region there around Stillwater. However, the other payoff here or positive thing about that is we don't have to feed hay. Okay, and we didn't. Very seldom did we, only in a really bad winter storm would we feed hay. The grass was always abundant, and we're just relying on what nutrients they can harvest from that with a protein supplement, feeding about 2.5 pounds of a high protein supplement a day. So this is what in our spring versus fall calving system, this is kind of a general look at what happens with their body weight change. As you can imagine, as you go through the winter, those lactating cows are going to lose body weight. And then when it greens up, they experience that compensatory gain. And by late summer, those cows are going to weigh at least another 150, 200 pounds. Spring calving cows, more uniform in their weight, simply because we're kind of designing their winter supplement to make sure that they don't lose weight, and then they're lactating through the summertime to kind of keep, which helps restrict their weight gain. Okay, same thing with body condition score. Pretty much as you'd expect, very same pattern. This is our reproductive performance over several years in spring versus fall calving, and it's not different. There's no significant difference here. In our pregnancy rates, it's interesting that we do seem to get a little bit higher AI conception in our fall calving system. Okay, so this is our calf weights. You know, nothing too fancy. I can't hardly read that, but I think it's 515 and 524. If you measure them on the same day, it's 205, 210 days of age. No difference really. Probably the lighter weight here is the fall calving, but then they just keep on going, right? And then we leave them on the cow longer, and this would be the steer weights clear out to day 270. So you know that is a pretty big advantage, the fall calving system, and we're just kind of using this like an intensive early stocking program. We just leave those big calves on the cows when the forage is really getting after it, and then we pull those big calves off and we go do something else with them, and you've reduced your stocking rate at a time of the year when forage is going to slow down in terms of growth and quality. Okay, this is actually same thing here. This is a little summary. Dr. Doy and I did a demonstration, or we analyzed a ranch's data over a 5-year period from Osage County one time. It's a really nice little data set, but we're just curious about their success in a spring versus fall calving system. And so it was an Osage County ranch, 5 years of data, springborn, same deal, springborn calves weaned in October. They sold them then also. And fallborn calves weaned in July, and we assume they sold them at that time as well. So very similar to what I just showed you that we do at the Range Cow Center. Very little hay fed in this operation. I'll show you here in a minute, but they fed quite a bit of concentrate supplement through the winter to their cows so that they didn't have to feed any hay. Spring cows, oh, there it is right there. Spring cows get 6 pounds of 20s. Fall cows got 7 pounds of 20s. That's just what they had been doing for years. Okay, not that we suggested or recommended it. That's just what they had been doing for a long time.
That's per day, obviously.
Per day, yes. And that's a lot of feed. That's a lot of concentrate feed if you're going to do that all winter long. And they did. They did it for 150 days. So that's why they were able to get by probably year after year after year without having to feed any hay in Osage County. There you see the size of their two groups of cows. Feed costs obviously are going to be advantage to the spring calving system, $40 or so advantage there because they're not feeding them quite as much. But weaning weights right at, what is that, 190, about 90 pounds heavier in the fall calving system because they are so much older, gaining faster on that late or early summer forage. Pregnancy rate, pretty similar to our data, not significant differences, 88 versus 90% pregnancy. Here's probably the big one, and that is, if you multiply these average prices times the weaning weight, I come up with another 100, as I recall, right at 120, 106 if you average the heifer and steer price. Okay, so compared to 40 increased feed costs. So that makes sense. So that being able to leave them on the cow and growing rapidly and big weaning weights without having to spend much more money on the cow, well, $40 actually pays pretty well. And that's one reason why we do like our fall calving system. Now these calves, they're higher price, but they're being sold in the time of the year when the market trend is at the bottom. They're higher price because they're smaller. Yeah, so the slide is really advantageous here. The relative price of the cattle is higher here in July, but they're bigger, so the discount for weight is making them look a little bit cheaper. But the total gross income is higher. Okay, so here's the other advantage. Their cull cows in this ranch weighed 1150 versus 1070. So they didn't even weigh 100 pounds more. I think we would see a little bit more than that in our cows. But, and you have a better price. October is the worst time of the year. As I assume JJ is going to show them here this evening. From a timing standpoint, this is a lot better time to be selling cows that are fleshing up, gaining weight, the price is better. So that wound up being, as I recall, if you multiply that times a 15% replacement rate, it was about another $20 per cow advantage to the fall calving system. Okay, so in that deal then, under those circumstances, the seasonal prices and cow weight favored the fall calving system. Seasonal calf price patterns also favor the fall calving system with July weaning. It's an advantage, of course, to the spring calving cows in terms of feed costs because you're not trying to hold together lactating cows. Price and weight benefits exceed cost difference, however, in the fall calving system. You know, obviously, if you had the management, and the time, and the interest, you know, and a lot of people do have a spring and fall calving system, you can definitely spread those bull costs, herd sire costs, over a lot more cows, and that's definitely an advantage. Real quick, before we talk about cow efficiency, let's just talk about what's going on in the cattle industry in general, all right? The big picture. So today, cattle have tremendous capacity for post-weaning growth and carcass weight. Things have changed a lot in the last 30 years. This is a genetic trend for yearling weight growth in the 7 most popular breeds in the country. Okay, and it is these trends on this slide, and a few more of these I'm going to show you, are adjusted for a crossbreed comparison. Okay, now I'm not interested in comparing what the different breeds are doing here. What's going on?
They're all going up.
They're all going up, right? So we have been aggressively selecting for growth in the cattle industry now for a long time, 50 years in fact, okay? And so my question is, and I'm going to challenge you as you leave Cow-Calf Bootcamp, what good does this do for your cows at home if most of you are cow-calf producers? And so let's talk about that and address it. There's a reason we're doing that, and what is it? We hope that our calves will be worth more when we sell them because the feedlot producer is going to be able to depend that they'll gain faster and he'll have better feed efficiency, and he can afford to pay you more because his cost of production per unit is going to be lower, right? That's what we hope is going to happen. But my question is, what is this doing to our cows? And it's probably a question that we haven't maybe spent enough time working on. Okay, so here's carcass weights. If you haven't seen this is what's going on with carcass weights. Same thing, right? We just keep going up and up and up. When I was early in graduate school, 750-pound carcass was a big carcass. Now, a 920-pound carcass is just average. Things have changed a lot. Look what's going on with cow carcass weights, though. They're starting to stabilize. What happened right here? 2011, 2012. Drought. Big drought, particularly it was extreme in southern Oklahoma and throughout Texas. Okay, and lots of thin cows come to market that year. But in general, it's interesting to me, this keeps going up and this is starting to stabilize, which I think is a good thing. Okay, weaning rates, generally speaking, again, 30,000 foot view here. These are different farm management record keeping systems. We don't worry about the different ones. I just want to show you that it has not improved. Okay, which is a little disappointing, right? So weaning rate, meaning fertility, reproductive efficiency in our cow herd, commercial cows across the country, basically has not changed. You see that? And that's 4 different systems. One from Kansas, one from North Dakota. This one is from Minnesota. This is Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico combined. Lots of data that says the same thing. Now, this is pretty good, right? That's a weaning rate of 90%. That's really good. In fact, we don't do that well in the South. Our average weaning rate is still around 83, 84, 85%. Okay? You all can explain to me why we're behind later. I don't know. It's interesting to think about though. Okay, this is weaning weight. Weaning weight, genetic trend in those same breeds, and it's obviously just like yearling weight, it's going up. What's going on in terms of commercial cow-calf segment weaning weights, basically it's not changing, okay? What does that tell you? We've got quite a bit of data that kind of looks at this, and there are some segments of the country, primarily Texas, where weaning weights do seem to still be going up, but a lot of the country, weaning weights are flat. What does that tell you? If seed stock industry, the genetic trend for weaning weight continues to increase, well, my take on that is that the seed stock industry, the purebred operations are probably going to take better care of their cattle, meaning they're going to make sure that the environment does not limit their weaning weights. So they might creep feed, they might feed better quality hay, they might turn them out on wheat pasture, and so on. You see where I'm coming from? Another $50 or $100 per cow cost is not that big of a deal to a seed stock operator. To a commercial cow-calf guy who's working on that margin, it is a big deal. And so I think that probably limits the environment. Forage quality is limiting weaning weight in commercial cow-calf operations. So that'll tell you something about where your emphasis ought to be, right? And you need to have the records to know if it's increasing in your operation. If you've been doing this for 5, 10 years where you've got those records, take a look and see if it's changing or not. Do you have a question, sir? No. Okay, so if it's not changing, what should you do? Focus more on cost of production and not so much on buying the bull with big weaning weights and trying to figure out how to make your weaning weights bigger, right? So here's the take home. Aggressive selection growth continues. We cannot seem to get enough growth. Cattle grow faster and finish at much heavier weights because the feed yard environment does not limit production. They have ice cream in front of them 24/7, right? But the cows out on the pasture, not so much. And so the ranching environment does limit at least weaning weight production. Don't get caught up chasing maximum growth. More profitable to focus on controlling production costs. Assuming you're a sell-at weaning operation, select for carcass quality as you go. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be trying to improve quality of our cattle post-weaning. I'm just saying that shouldn't be your priority. We can do both, and we have the tools to do both, and you're going to get a lot of direction here in the next couple of days on how to do that. How many flies she got? And are they pointed up or down? Here we go. Let's talk about reducing cost of production and what can you do? And there's some pretty simple things you can do. So I think this is probably number one, because the sires represent your genetics of the cows if you're retaining your own heifers for many years to come, right? So moderate growth, not maximum, because there's also a relationship between growth rate and mature cow size. Okay, and you probably want to maintain moderate cows if you're trying to reduce your cost of production. Perhaps breed average, or even in some breeds, perhaps slightly below. Also, moderate milk. We'll talk about this more in just a minute. For most breeds, below breed average. I'll show you why I say that. Moderate mature cow size, and again, this one below breed average. Select sires or genetics that will maintain your cow size, or even perhaps bring them down a little bit. Now, I don't think any of us in extension are suggesting that we select for 800, 900 pound cows. At some point, you're going to pay the price if you don't have cattle that can perform in the feed yard, and you get that reputation for having cattle that will not perform well in the feed yard. So you can do both, moderate cows. So we marketed our fall-born calves here, oh gosh, it was the 1st of March. Those cattle come out of the feed yard, weighed 1525. They paid on $1,460. Okay, they gained 3.6 pounds a day, and they converted at about 5.6, as I recall. 5.6 pounds of feed per pound of weight gain. So, you can find cases where cattle do a lot better than that. All I'm trying to say is our cows weigh about 1150, maybe 1200, and we're making 1,464 pound finished cattle out of them. How much bigger cows do we need? Right? Why would we need a bigger, more expensive factory when we're already making steers that weigh 920 pounds average carcass weight? Right? It makes no sense to me for us to continue to do whatever selection pressure we put on that might increase our cow size. Breed average or below, dry matter intake. Several breeds now have a dry matter intake EPD. And this is yet another tool. It's a relatively new tool because we've discovered there's lots of difference in individual animals in terms of how much they like to eat. It's like my two kids, right? Lots of difference. And so this is just a genetic tool that will help us going forward to find cattle that still really perform well but don't have to eat all that much. Okay? So that's a good thing, a nice development. And then the next thing you can do, maybe the most important thing you can do, are these reproductive genetic tools. One, for example, ones that are available, this is a really good one, Stayability. It's been around for 20 years now. So it's actually got pretty long-term history and some success. While the rest of the industry has been stable in fertility, these breeds that have been implementing this EPD have been making slow but steady progress in fertility. Okay? And that would be Simmental, Red Angus, South Devon, Gelby, Brian, I think has a Stayability. Those breeds have been making some progress on fertility with that, particularly with that EPD.
And how do you define stayability?
Well, so stayability is the ability of a cow to, right now it's defined to stay in the herd until she's 6 years of age and wean a calf every year. The day she doesn't wean a calf, if she doesn't wean one at say 5, she basically gets kicked out, and her stayability and her sire's stayability EPD goes down. Does that make sense? And so the more of that bull's daughters that successfully gets to 6 and weans a calf every year, stayability keeps going up. Sustained cow fertility, this is a new one in the Hereford breed. It's only about 2 years old now, and it is fantastic. I really like that one because it takes her until she's 12. Okay, and if a bull has daughters, I use an example of 2 bulls that both have over 200 daughters in production. One bull, I don't remember exactly, but the difference in the sustained cow fertility EPD is 45 units, which tells you that if both of those bulls had 102-year-old daughters calve, and you jump forward 10 years when they're all 12, the one bull that has 45 unit higher sustained cow fertility has 45 more 12-year-old cows left on your place. Now, how cool is that? Wouldn't you like to have that information 20 years ago? I mean, for crying out loud, that's just phenomenal. Excellent docility. So, as we go over time here, yes, I know people complain about having too much information, but I think things are just continuing to get a little bit better all the time. Now we've got EPDs for udders. Hereford cattle, for crying out loud, did not have a good reputation for good udder quality. Well, they have an EPD now, and they are making progress for udder quality. And we don't use a Hereford bull that doesn't have a plus 1.3 or higher EPD for udder suspension and teat size, both. They have one for each. And we look for high EPDs for both of those things. We're not going to use a Hereford bull if he doesn't have a good history of females with good udder quality. There's just no point. Feet and legs, this is brand new in the Angus breed, and it's going to be helpful. Lots of people. I have a grad student in Wyoming. She tells me about 2 years ago, they have about 900 cows. She says, what is going on? We have got to find a way to improve the longevity of our Angus bulls. We just have lots of trouble with cracked feet, with low heels and long toes and so on. Well, they've finally developed an EPD for that, and they're working on it. So Lots of good things are happening. This is why I say you can have too much milk, okay? And there are a couple of breeds that, that are still aggressively selecting for more milk over time. In 1984, the National Research Council said the average commercial cow gave about 15 pounds of milk. Well, they published that again in 2016. They said the average commercial cow gives about, I'm going to say it was about 20 pounds of milk. We think they're behind because we've got one commercial cow herd, if you can see that. We've measured for 3 years, since 2015, I guess 4 years now. Their average peak lactation is 31. And these are just commercial Angus cows. Okay, and we have not selected intentionally for high milk production. They're just kind of breed average. Okay, and so you think the environment can support that? This set of cows are a little bit harder keeping. Okay, they're harder to keep in body condition score, and I think that's why. So you can overdo milk production for sure, and that's why if you're gonna minimize cost of production, we can do that by moderating milk production. How big are they now? Let's talk about just a minute about cow size. This data is kind of getting to be dated, but even when this was published, which was 2007, at this point in time, the Hereford, Angus, Red Angus cows, F1 cows, were bigger, weighed more at maturity than Simmental, Limousin, Charolais, and Gelbvieh. Did you know that? Kind of surprised me when I first saw it. So you just can't think about cattle the way we did 20 or 30 years ago. They have changed a lot. And what's done that is we didn't have a tool to control mature cow size, but we were selecting for growth, aggressively selecting for growth. And that generally led to cows that were more expensive to keep, and bigger cows eat more. There's the genetic trend for mature cow weight in Herefords. Went up rapidly, and it's still increasing. It's not, it looks like maybe it's starting to tail off, kind of like those cow carcass weights. This is the Angus genetic trend for mature cow weight. You can see it went up really rapidly there for a while. We were coming out of that kind of my high school years when cattle were about this tall, right? And then now it's still creeping up, but it's not as aggressive.